G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. The season has come and gone and we are recording for one last time in 2024. Let's go!
Hodge has done it from nowhere. Busted the goal from inside the 30. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you'd think by now we'd have this figured out, but I am joined, as always, by the Content Creators Cup champion. You can't take that away from him for at least 12 months. Luke Rogerson, mate, how are you?
Good, mate. I let you drive one time.
Yeah, and I fucked it up.
I almost had to check your pulse. That Let's Go lasted that long. I thought you'd pass out on me.
Running out of gas by the end there. But, mate, it's been and gone, done and dusted. A little bonus episode here to wrap up the season.
Yeah, it's done. I'm not sure who'll listen, but we're going to talk about, some learnings
Probably the hardcore listeners here right now, the people who still can't get enough of it. But
if you're listening now, you can consider yourself hardcore.
Yeah.
Wear it like a badge of honour.
Yeah, wear it like a badge of honour. And I think, look, I wanted to do this podcast today just to, while it's fresh, that too. But while it's fresh, kind of go through some learnings.
Yep.
Also, whilst the game is still open, because if we left this till next year, the game wouldn't be open and you wouldn't be able to go through the season like week by week. And look, I'll gloat a bit. I had a good season. It might not have sounded like it at times when I was complaining and all this sort of stuff. But it was stressful at times. But sort of that last week when I knew it was out of top 10, out of car, contention, I was sort of resigned to the fact that, hey, I'm going to win a hat, and that's pretty cool. It's my first hat, so pretty happy about it. Finished 16th in the end. Like I said to you before the podcast, I was kind of hoping for 17th, just for the Richmond.
It's a good Richmond number.
But I'll absolutely take top 16. So.
Yeah, and also, you've got in the run sheet here a few thank yous and whatnot that we'll go through in a second, but I think what you have missed is the congratulations section, because I like to bust your chops a little bit, but in all seriousness, congratulations on your first hat, mate. And
thank you.
The fact of it is that we jump on, we talk a lot of shit, you talk a lot of shit on Twitter as well, but you genuinely do work hard at this, and you put in a lot of time, you put in a lot of energy, and so it's pretty cool to see you get a hat. Yeah, no,
it feels like a bit of reward for effort. And congratulations not only to everyone who won a hat this year, but anyone who had their best season. I think honestly, that's the best thing we can strive for, and I think if you've had the best season you've had before, whether or not that's top 100, top 1,000, top 10,000, whatever it is, you beat your mates or whatever it is. If you had a season that was good by your centres, then, pat yourself on the back and well done, and hopefully had a little bit of fun along the way. And I definitely did, that's what it is at the end of the day. It's something that's takes your mind off the, rest of your life, whether that be good or bad. But I think that is... You're
saying we're all hiding from something?
Yeah, 100%. I am. Responsibilities.
Don't say that too loud, mate. Ellie's probably downstairs.
But I do want to say some thank yous. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to you, Luke, because this podcast will be a hell of a lot more boring if it was just me here chatting. You bring a lot of energy and life and humour to the podcast, and some good ideas trickled in there throughout the season as well.
Occasionally something gets through.
But no, seriously, thank you, mate. You've made this season very enjoyable, and everyone else who's jumped on the podcast as well. So, shout out to Bales, who's always ready at a drop of a hat if I need someone to jump on here. We had a few of the other podcast hosts on at the beginning of the show that all jumped on and did some season previews and things like that. We had Darren Carr at the start of last year's winner jump on the very first episode of this season. So a lot of well-informed and good guests on throughout the year. So, shout out to them.
Last but not least, you guys.
Yeah.
The audience.
Legends out there. And particular shout out to those guys who supported us financially by, dropping super chats, dropping questions on Ask You on Q. And
we wouldn't have had beers to drink if it wasn't for the
fans. No, thanks for shouting the beers. It means a lot. And obviously for anyone to part with any of their money for schmucks like us on the internet, it's it's a good sign of hopefully we're doing something right, and you guys appreciate. But also everyone else who's just watched, supported, liked videos, shared things. It's very much appreciated.
I mean, we'd happily sit here and talk to ourselves, but it makes it a little bit more fun if other people get involved too.
Yeah, 100%. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through my season. Now, again, it sounds a bit pretentious, but I had
don't stop now.
I had a pretty good year, and so what I did wanted to do, and because what I want to try and repeat this.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
The goal is next year to try and win another hat and get back up there. So
you've only got one head. If you win another hat, mate, what's going to happen?
I have to share it around, mate.
Yeah, I'll have a wear.
I've got one other head, but probably a bit small for a hat.
Nice. Well played.
We'll move on. But I did want to go through and talk through my season in particular. What worked, what didn't work, and look, go through the good parts of my season, starting team, trades, and the things that probably I can look to improve on again. And hopefully some of you guys can take away something from this and put it in your black book. A lot of people will be talking about players and things for next year.
Yeah.
I think it's almost more important to be reflecting on strategy and process more so, because a lot of that gets lost in the preseason. We're also on the preseason. We're focused on that starting team.
Yeah, we are.
But it's actually such a small part of the year, to be honest. Like, you could pick up AFL Fantasy 3 weeks out.
You 100% could.
And get a really solid team going. And if you trade really well, you could win a hat.
Well, the best preseason cliche is it's a trading game after that.
Yeah, and it's 1,000,000% true.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at, nothing highlights that more than I'm pretty sure that at the start of each year, the traders put out a team right before the first ball's bounced and say, hey, here's a generic team. And you dead set could win yourself a car with the generic team most years, I reckon.
Now, hopefully you guys hear us say that and still tune into our preseason content.
But just ignore if you do not need to.
But I do think it is legitimately, it's the biggest thing. So let me put on this screen share here. This is my starting team. So
careful,
this
mate.
Is how the team.
Last time you screen shared, you had some naughty content.
I made sure to delete all that sort of stuff. It's in the other window. But yeah, so this is the starting team, and like a lot of you might be looking at this, and like it's not anything special.
I can't see the forwards, mate.
The forwards are down here.
There we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Well, now I can't see the defenders.
Yeah, they don't fit, all right? So starting in the defence, like Sheasel, a lot of us had. Whitfield up to that round 0, a lot of us had. Hayden Young, our boy. I had Christian Salem, was maybe one of the more unique players there. Didn't set me up for success, really.
Oh,
I mean, God. 88, he scored. Elliot Yeo, Zach Williams, very, very generic. Dawson, so I paid up for, I think he was priced at 110 at the start of the year. So I did pay up for at least one of those bigger boys, and
it didn't work for any of them this year.
I don't regret it. Like, he started 89, but then 131, which I did get captained. 100, 112. He had that gross 60, but then a 155, 122. So he actually started not too bad up until probably, that 60 against Hawthorn in round 12. So you could look at it and say that he didn't average what I paid. He averaged 105. But as a starting pick, I actually don't think it was that big of a flop. Because of his ability to hit ceiling scores, and I did captain some of the bigger ones. So I think that was okay. A lot of people will still say I would have been better off going with just Rosie Butters, and maybe I would have, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Butters, Steele, Wines. Butters was an interesting one because he missed that game. He had that rolled ankle.
Yeah.
If you remember way back when, and didn't play that preseason game, but chose to start him. There was a point where I had John Newcomb in my team, and a lot of people
but you're fucking happy you
started that. I know I was listening to Tim Guest on the Fanatics last night. He started with John Newcomb, and that was a horror pick. So it just goes to show some of those like
sliding doors.
Ollie Wines, he was very nearly Crouch.
Yeah, and guys like Wines, I had aim on. These guys were just neither here nor there, and it was these were some of the guys that you were kind of looking to pivot off pretty quickly.
Holmes was one that we definitely should have talked about more.
Bonner.
Bonner. So
one
he
we
was a
both
big
missed.
miss.
Huge.
I did not have Bonner for the
It's
entire
a shock.
season.
It's actually a shock you finished where you did.
He was killing me for way too long. Like the first 10 rounds.
So is the lesson there, because you want to talk about this from the lesson's perspective, is the lesson you just got to swallow your pride on that and just get it done? Like,
No, I took a different lesson away. I think the lesson in terms of starting teams, I think it's more important to nail the underpriced premiums than it is to nail the mid-pricer.
okay.
The underpriced, and sometimes they'll get lumped into the same category, but like an underpriced premium, like Lockie Whitfield, he came into the season price 95, goes 112. Sheasel, he came into the season price at 98, he goes 112. Hayden Young would be in that category as well. Like Zach Butters, Jack Steele, Nick Martin,
Isaac
Heaney, Max Gawn, massive one of those. Tristan Sherry, I didn't start with him, but got him in round 2.
Do you think we were spoiled with
those
those
are the
this
most
week?
important picks.
This year? Do you think we were a little bit spoiled? When you list those names, there's...
Yeah, I mean, there was a few, wasn't there?
It really was.
But there is a lot of years. Go back the year before, like the forward line was full of them. You had all those forwards. We had the big 5 that you could have started with.
That's true. Maybe next year we're sitting here talking about guys like Bailey Smith.
Yeah. Because the thing with Riley Bonner is you get the awesome cash gen.
Yeah.
You get like the great scoring instead of a rookie or whatever. But there is always that element of when do I trade him out? And if you wait too long, he can actually start to burn you. Yeah. And you're conceding points on the back end of it. If you nail the exit point and you get off at the right time, then it's awesome, no worries. But with an underpriced premium, you don't have that lingering question. Yeah. They're just there, and you're not ever worried that they're going to drop a 40 on you or something like that. So.
I guess that's a good point. And I mean, like, all said and done, your team would have been better had you had him. But it's not maybe as important as you might think, which I think you've shown.
I think so,
extent,
so. With that said, though, I'm pretty sure the winner never had Max Gawn. Which is more impressive as it is.
I guess it shows more than one way to skin the cat, doesn't it?
So 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the major regrets that I had, I really regret not starting with Tristan Sherry. Only because I'd set it all pre-season.
It was just that score in round zero by Grundy. And then, oh man. And Grundy didn't have a bad year, but like to switch it and then get the 53.
That was more the thing, that I swapped it last second. I was always Sherry and Max, and that was the pick. And then I might have been able to get onto a Bonner, had I actually had that extra trade. To a lesser extent, I'd been tossing up Crouch and Wines, got that 50-50 call wrong. But again, that was okay. So after this point, we'll go through some of the trades. Just make sure I'm in the right sort of spot.
You mentioned here in your notes as well, you started most of the major rookies, obviously looking at that team there as well. So like looking at that, there's not many that you missed there.
So started with...
Other than Sharpie.
Where did I get? Sharpie down here.
Oh, you did start with Sharpie.
There he is. I'm trying to... I think I'm in the way here. Yeah, move this. Rookies over to the... Sorry, rookies on the right. So I did start Sharp, which I think you didn't start.
I miss
Sharp.
Sharpie?
I think that might have been the one that you didn't have that I did.
Yep. I had to get on Sharpie. And then
so
I held him longer than you. Got all those good scores in that little patch.
And so I did miss Dempsey, but because I had all the others, I know a lot of people at the start had to kind of choose between Sharp and Dempsey.
Yeah.
Where I was able to jump on both, which I'm pretty sure Tom never had, like Tom from Pom United, he never had Sharp, I believe. So that might have cost him a bit of cash in the end. But nailing all those rookies, which I think, and this is something that registered really strongly with me at the start. I think Selby said it. Trying to build your team from the basement up, not from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Yep.
So picking all the right rookies, picking all them the right mid prices, and then filling in the premiums at the end, I think was a good way to go about it in terms of just something that clicked into my mind. So I think nailing those rookies, which are getting the last few years, they're getting easier, I think, to name. Like so much people are on top of it and that kind of thing.
Completely agree.
And round zero just made it even easier this year, I think, as well. So
how many mid prices did you have to start with in the end?
Oh, that's a good question. So I had. See, what would you classify Nick Martin as a mid pricer?
Underpriced premium.
I'd say he's a mid pricer. So Wines.
Yeah.
Salem. Yo.
Yeah.
So what's that? 1, 2, 3. Mackenzie 4.
Yeah.
James Jordan 5.
So the only one of those really
6.
that you look back and think was like that was a good pick is probably Yo to start the season.
Yeah,
like
Yo.
Mackenzie had to move quickly. Wines the same. James Jordan wasn't exactly what we'd hoped.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Sexton
So
was
it's
bad
like-
at the start.
So
A lot of flops.
Yeah, it is. So like you make one of those Bonner, you correct that, I guess. But it probably shows as well that
You don't need to nail them.
again you can kind of get it. There's ways.
I think sometimes having a shit pick can actually be a really big blessing because it just makes those moves to get onto the guy who is popping really clear.
It's an obvious move.
Like
yeah.
I had Cam Mackenzie here.
Yep.
It was so obvious for me. Trade him out. He's
And who
gone.
did he become in round one?
So I think in round
Sorry,
2,
I'm jumping ahead.
you're right. So he became Dempsey as I went Grundy to Sherry. So
get on
and that banked me a bit of cash too.
Yeah.
Which allowed me in the next. So that was a good trade. I think obviously getting Tristan Sherry, like seeing that going straight away.
Yep.
Not mucking around, and then going round 3 into I could do a little double upgrade in this round here. Move our faces again. Why? Let's do that. I'm moving us around. So yeah, being able to go Sexton up to Tom Powell, Wines up to Matt Crouch, because Matt Crouch had kind of got ahead of him at that point.
Yeah.
Because I banked the cash from the last week,
Well
that made that
positioned.
possible. So moving off. So in the first, 2 rounds, I've moved off 4 failed mid prices.
Yeah, and that's the priority that time of year, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's not. You have to resist the urge to maybe a premium's dropped you a stinky score. You have to resist the urge to go there, and you're going to have to get on these guys who you think are going to make yourself make a cash.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of set me up, and it was at this point I sort of felt well structured. I sort of felt like I had some of the major points. I think it might have been this round or the round before where Bonner went crap, and I went somewhere else.
That was the one that killed us because
And then he started going good after that.
Yeah, exactly. That was enough to justify us not getting on, and then from that point, yeah.
But outside of missing Bonner, I was pretty happy with the other things. And the other thing with my structure is and what helped me get away with Bonner is, without having Bonner, I should say, is like, where would you replace him? Like, who of these midfielders would you have had? Because I couldn't have him as a defender at that point. Like, I was happy with the 3 defenders there. Sorry, the mids
Yeah,
there.
you're not moving
rookies.
those guys, the rookies.
Nick
You're not
Martin,
moving
you're happy
Nick
with.
Martin.
Crouch, you're happy
you've
with.
now got, yeah.
So I was kind of happy to go against a player like that because I'd been set up with good players anyway. Like, you can only fit 8 players in there.
And I think that goes back to the point that you make before. If you have somebody in a mid-price category that's underperforming, it makes it really easy to move to the guy who's popping, but there's no reason to force that guy into your team if you feel like your structure is working okay, which at this point it obviously was for you. So
Yeah. So that was sort of why I guess I was able to get away with fading a popular, successful pick that a lot of people had. So, all right, so we'll keep moving on. So we'll keep going through some of the trades that maybe worked. The last one in that sort of period there, and this is, I think the start of my season was pretty successful, where I moved Christian Salem, got him to Jordan Clark, Lazaro to Harvey Thomas, who's then spent the entire rest of the year in my team. So
good on you, Harvey.
On you, Harvey. But yeah, Christian Salem going to Jordan Clark before his early buy, and Jordan Clark, he'd put up at that point, what did he put up? A few 90s in a row, but just liked what I saw, was able to make that trade. I think after a little while, he had a good run coming up with West Coast, Bulldogs, Richmond, Sydney, Saints, Collingwood, Melbourne, sort of identified that run.
This was something you did well this year, and I'm inflating your ego even more, but I do remember you early in the season, you have everything planned out, and that's not to say that it's going to go that way, but you've identified these key markers during the season where you feel like a player that you want to get is going to go into a good run.
Yeah.
Whether that be coming off their buys, so naturally trading them in there, or whether it just be that you've identified a good run and you want to get after it. I feel like there weren't many trades you made this season that were just kind of like, oh, he's a good player, bring him in. It was purposeful.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time it's like not waiting for that big score to then get them on, like anticipating the big score is going to come when I bring them in. Trying to get ahead, which is easier said than done, because sometimes you fall flat on your face. And not every trade worked, but there were a few of those ones where at the time people were discussing that they'd been poor.
Yes. But not acknowledging that they might have been on a tough run.
Yeah, they had a tough run to that point, but were coming into a good run, which is, I think, something where a lot of us can get a little bit better at. So I think those sort of set me up pretty well with a lot of those fix-up trades, and then we started to get into sort of upgrades and things like that. And I think I started to really hit my straps around round 8. So I'll skip ahead, not going to through every fucking round. But round 8, I think, was a solid trade for me because this was the trade, and I want to talk about this trade for a little bit.
Yeah.
This is the trade where a lot of people went the Tristan Sherry to Jordan Sweet.
Yeah.
And a lot of people could identify this week as the week where it fell apart for them.
It's tough.
And I got in Jordan Sweet.
Yeah.
But I did it as an R3 option.
Yeah.
Also getting in an upgrade in Nick Dacos.
Did you have cash banked, or was this no? Because you would have generated.
I might have had a little bit of cash, but to get there, I would have had to have had a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've traded out 2 very popular, well-performing rookies, and a lot of people would have held Sharp for a bit longer at this point.
They were rewarded.
They were rewarded, but it also this highlights another point which I've sort of talked about before is like. You can jump off those rookies early if it means getting the guy you want, which for me at this point was Nick Dacos. And this is one of those instant reward kind of things. What round is this? 8. So he, in round 8, that started this run.
I remember that. I think I traded him in the week before.
You did this week, yeah.
And got that, and then that was kind of highlighted to me when you went, okay, I'll wait a week, and you missed a 90 and got a 120.
Yeah, so the week before I got a Caldwell, which, so... I got worse. I would have been better if I traded him in the week before, but traded him in this week, and that's where that instant reward 122, 131. I traded him in this week because I wanted to make sure I could have him for the West Coast matchup.
Yeah.
So I got a bit lucky with that
perhaps.
first score. With him, I think that was a game he kicked a goal like last 10 seconds or something like that.
But he went on a bender after that, didn't he?
But yeah, he had the run. So it was the West Coast, Eagles, Freo, the Bulldogs, Melbourne's when he, copped that tag and injured. But I sort of identified these are teams all here that don't tag that I wanted to get him in for at that point. So
talk about, the Jordan Sweet move is a tough one because if you're not accounting for COVID when you trade him.
Yeah.
And so I think, does he... So not only does he get COVID, and if I'm remembering it rightly, then the week when he has the opportunity to come back, Soldo is then healthy again. Like that couldn't have gone more poorly. Not only for
could have gone worse.
We saw this as like a zinger cash gen opportunity.
Yeah.
Because we were at R3, but even people who traded like from R2 to him, that should have worked out in their favour. He's a guy that's shown enough times that if he's on the park, he's gonna give you 90 plus, and it should have worked out. You can't account for that kind of stuff.
It is one where you can go hindsight. You shouldn't have done that, but I do, and we've got records of this. Like at the time, we said there's risks involved because you're trading out of a player who's done well to that point, Tristan Sherry, and this was before he went fucking gangbusters.
Yeah.
And whenever you're trading down from a player on your field to someone else to make cash. That's a risk because no matter what upgrade you get on the other side, if you're trading from someone who you would think is playing well and you're potentially copping a hit in that trade, like if I'm trying to make a 40-point upgrade, but to do that I have to make a 10-point downgrade to make the cash work.
Was Sherry going poorly to that
upgrade.
point? Is that why people were entertaining it?
I think we just expected him to be that mid-price so that eventually we'd be trading out.
So we were basically thinking that we were cashing in a price rise and going, this guy's reached his ceiling.
It kind of felt, for some people, like a sideways move.
Yeah, I feel for people that cop that.
And the buy round was another thing. So Sweet had that nice round 13 buy round.
Yes.
But that, again, was another appeal for the R3 because at that time you could have then had a round 12 buy round in Sherry, a round 13 buy in Sweet, and a 14 buy in Max.
Regardless of which way you did it, it went to shit.
But again, one of the questions someone asked me on Twitter is, what can we remind ourselves how badly this went so we don't do this again? I think every situation is individual, but the key thing for me is remembering if you have to make a downgrade on field to get an upgrade somewhere else, it's less enticing to me than just doing it on your bench because there's no risk of that going poorly for you. because anytime you change something on your field, there's obviously downside, right? So what round was that?
Round 8. So that is probably he's coming off an 83, but then prior to that he's doing
126,
pretty well.
It's before he even had his 57, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think I just think a lot of people had in their head that narrative that
I'm going to trade him out around 12.
Exactly, I think they had that narrative, which I don't begrudge them for.
Yeah, no, it definitely made sense at the time, but just a bit of learnings to how to avoid that next time. The next week. And this is where I started to sort of get up there. Round 9, trade in Bonds. This is one of those players that, to that point, would sort of be people were a bit frustrated with him. Why doesn't it not scroll up until at the top of the bloody page? So I traded him in here. And to that point, there was a 149 in round 4, but a lot of, average scores. There was a 53, there was a 96. Traded him in here.
Yeah.
Was really targeting this matchup, that Richmond matchup.
Well, you're looking for,
he was value at that time.
Yeah, and he's gone huge in a good matchup against Geelong there. So you got a bit of proof to say that against a good matchup, he could go big.
Yeah.
Obviously, the following 2 weeks, you would have been pretty frustrated about.
Yeah, you would have been. I think this was the week you traded him in.
Thanks. Thanks for the reminder.
So, and again, maybe the learnings there is like...
Don't chase the ceiling.
You've seen that score and you're going, oh, wow, that's awesome. I'm going to trade in a guy. And look, I think this should have been a good matchup.
That's an anomaly.
And I remember, and like 53 is retarded. Like, that's gross. I shouldn't say that.
You can't say that word. No. That's not
PC. That's crap, right? Like, is that his worst score?
Yeah, it's his worst score in basically
forever, right?
Since Jesus played fullback for Nazareth.
Like 71's disappointing, but it's still 20 points better than that. So that's where the unlucky part is. Your flaws are your flaws, but then there's another level to it. But again, trying to resist the urge of you see the big score, you're not getting that score when you trade them in. Hunt those matchups. So that one was pretty solid there. What were the other ones that I wanted to highlight? I had a few there.
We're taking a while. I like your round 13 one. You want to talk through round 13? I think
let's go
that was
13.
Probably the best 2-week trade I've ever seen.
Yeah, so this was interesting, right? Because this is where we get to the buys. And this is the advantage of being ahead of the game in terms of your trade cadence. Because if you get to the point where you're completing your team...
Planning ahead.
At that buy round, or sort of like... If I am confident that I'm going to finish my team and have no rookies on the field, I can start doing these little sideways shuffles. And I was hesitant on this move. I didn't think it was the right thing to do at the time, but it turned out for that short period, amazing. Zach Butters, Errol Goulden. Goulden, I get him in for this 151, 113,
Butters
114.
Butters goes 0 that same week.
Butters has nothing. Oh, sorry, it wasn't that 151. It was this 151.
Yeah.
And then, 127 and then a 154. So 3 weeks in a row I've gotten his ceiling scores.
Butters went 0 and then I think Butters went subpar the following week from memory.
Yeah, so I've traded him out as buy. Yeah, then he gets tagged to a 67, the 124. But that's 30 points less than what Errol did at that point.
Yeah,
so plus, you get obviously an extra week with him.
And provided, like you said, provided that your team comes out complete, you're happy with that. And obviously there were people at that point in the season who, myself included, who just couldn't be doing sideways trades.
And it's that price movement as well. Errol shoots up in price. I think at this point, Butters had a few... Why does it keep doing this? Butters had a few like lower ones beforehand, so his break-even was already pretty high, and then that one just sent his price down the floor. So it's a sliding doors moment, and it's not like I saw that coming. Like I wasn't like going, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen. But he did have a good matchup. That was the Geelong one, I think. Yeah, Geelong. So just playing that sort of short-term game. And that's where the trade cadence is super important, because if I still had extra players to upgrade, like I wouldn't be doing moves like that. I'd be cashing up to make sure next week's move was good. And this is where there's a little bit of luck involved, right? Because not all injuries are created equal. The timing of your injuries are critical. Like between that period of rounds 5 to 12, if you cop an injury in those weeks, which a lot of people did with Tom Green, those are really hard to come back from, because not only does that affect you the week of, those are the weeks that we're all upgrading premiums, getting rookies off field. If you are a week behind that, then you can't do moves like this.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder to come back on some of those teams that don't cop that injury. So
for sure.
I think that's injuries are not all created equal in that regard. Round 13. And then to wrap up my good trades, then we'll go into the shit ones because there was still a lot of shit ones. Round 19, I had a nice trade. I like this move from me. Like, previously I traded in Luke Ryan. He went shit. Had him for 2 weeks. But it was pretty quick to trade him back out to Tom Stewart. He was a unique for me for a little while when I recognised his role was going well. And I brought in Luke Jackson for 1 week. Got 111, but didn't fall in love with it. And then traded him straight out to Dylan Moore, which I think set me up pretty well. Like just the 1 week of a Luke Jackson. And that was pretty solid, I thought.
I think that was a really specific case. And it is hard to trade out a 111. You know what I mean? It's hard to trade out a good score.
I think it wasn't so hard in his situation, but yeah.
There's certain situations where it might demand it.
Let's talk about some shit trades. Shit trades. Round 8.
Lucky we're not talking about my shit trades.
Oh. So I was going pretty solid pretty much through the bye. I exited the bye round 15. I was 7th. I got as high as 4th. Yeah, so at this point I'm 4th. But this week I made my first horrible trade. This is the one that probably hurt the most out of all of my trades. Oh, man. Tristan Sherry to Rowan Marshall, Nick Martin to Rory Laird. Nick Martin to Rory Laird, whatever. But Sherry to Marshall, that hurts. And I believe this week was the week before Max Gawn got injured. So this is the ultimate hindsight. If that was a Max Gawn to Marshall, I'm flying.
You might be sitting in the Hilux.
I'm flying. But I trade out this guy. I was happy with trading in Marshall. Like, I traded him in here. He goes huge. Just no score under 100. Massive. At this point, no one in the top 10 had Rowan Marshall.
Yeah, okay.
So I was trading in a player that was unique.
It's just
but it's also the player you're trading out. Yeah. I was the only person without Tristan Sherry, that was painful. Very painful.
It was just not a good year to trade out Tristan Sherry.
And I'm trying to wrap my brain around, like...
Is there a learning?
Like, yeah, but at that time...
You can't foresee.
I didn't envision what Tristan Sherry was going to turn into. Like, he was doing well, and he was averaging, I think, like 105 up until that point.
Yeah.
But I just thought, I can make 10 points on this trade, be unique, differentiate myself. Maybe I could have looked at the run a bit closer.
The run was good. Geelong, like going to Geelong, Richmond, West Coast. Yeah. Maybe that's the learning.
That's the lesson.
Is just look at the player you're trading out, because I think you might have fallen in love with the player you were trading in.
Someone like I can't remember who, but someone at the time mentioned, could you trade out Max Gawn? And we all kind of like, it's hard to trade out a player to that point who'd done so well.
It's an injury.
There were signs beforehand. Like, he wasn't going well a couple of games beforehand.
He looked a little bit tired, didn't he?
Yeah, there was a few
signs. Of games like,
yeah, 98, 77. I mean, we kind of maybe just chalked that up to the Brisbane matchup, like Big O. But he's dominated Big O.
Gone well.
Yeah.
So is the lesson there is like you do have to look at it so impartially, because we all love Big Max and we know that Big Max can give us 150s. It's hard to trade out a name like that.
Yeah. It is.
But maybe you need to heed the warning signs.
Yeah, maybe no one's untouchable is like a bit of a way you could spin that. And on the other side of this, like Nick Martin, one of the things I do regret is I traded Nick Martin to Rory Laird. I could have, because I was trying to make the cash for this work.
Yeah.
I could have traded Nick Martin to someone like a Connor Rosie and had enough money for the following week where I trade in Brian Myers, which I think is another poor trade. This is my worst week. Where I traded in Luke Ryan and Brian Myers. If I had enough money and I went to Rosie the week before, I could have got in Dylan Moore, which was my preferred guy at that stage. So a lesson there was like, even though at this time of the year you're hunting for the best, don't discount the guys who are cheap. Just because they're cheap doesn't mean they're not going to be the best.
Am I right in saying that Luke Ryan trade coming in targeted a matchup, but it just didn't work?
This is something I regret. I traded in Luke Ryan at this point because a lot of people traded him in earlier than me, and I had the advantage of not having him when he was going poorly.
Yeah.
I traded him in because of this Richmond matchup, and I was scared of him being, I think, 70 or 80% owned in the top 10, of him putting like a 160 on me there.
But you could have just conceded a 1 week good matchup, knowing that he was going into...
So he was going, Richmond, Hawthorn, Melbourne, West Coast. That was a really good run for defenders at the time. This was also the UTAS Stadium, which I identified being a good role, a good ground, good scoring. He put up the 140 against Melbourne last time.
We knew he wasn't going to do that again. The Melbourne game before the bye for Luke Ryan just, I think, highlighted to a lot of teams around the competition of like, this is what Fremantle want to do. Yeah. So what does a good opposition team do? Well, they take away what the other team wants to do. And so I think a lot of teams from that point just said, well, if you want to have these cheap marks, we're just going to not give them to you.
Yeah. And I'm annoyed at myself because we identified that and I held off for a little while, but then still succumbed to the FOMO of it a little bit there.
It's almost like you had that plan so sort of far ahead almost
to
that
it
you kind of were
regardless
like, oh, well, this is what I've had planned. I just need to execute this.
No, that's probably, you're right. I think I did. There was a bit of that. And I had this graphic up from the thing here. So that was this
Looks
round.
like a big inverted peen. Wait, inverted?
So this is the round that I just lost the shit on the podcast.
Which way would a peen be inverted?
That way?
That's the way the peen would normally hang.
Oh, right. Yeah. Don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's your peen graph.
So
it looks nothing like a peen. I'm a sicko.
So look, these are the round rakes, these blue lines here. And, there's some better ones than other ones, but there's obvious 34,000. And it just so happened that this was also your best round. So
it says a lot.
This is the round that you beat me by 300 points. And I've gone from my best overall rank at any point in the season, round 4 to round 15. So
you know what they say? It's a bit like last goal wins. It's round 15 wins. Yeah.
Your best round 16 score or whatever it was. That's what makes it so. I just thought that was pretty funny. The summary of the season. There's a lot of good season, but then just a couple of these shocking weeks that got me in a bit of trouble. Let's fly through some of these other ones. Another trade that I really do regret. Is it round 18? Yeah, going max to Tim English. So even though I traded out Sherry, I had the opportunity to correct that mistake. I had 2 shots at it, and I went English over
But at that
Sherry.
point, he hadn't notched up the 150
Not yet. And I went to English because he had the
good run.
The run. They both had the same 3 or 4 teams over the next 4 weeks, but English had the 4 matchups closer, like the better 3 and then the bad one 4th. Whereas I think Sherry had them flipped. He had the hard one first and then the 3 easy ones after. I should have not cared. I should have just gone the guy who'd shown more visually to the eye. And the advice at the time was Sherry was the pick. I was just trying to be a bit fancy.
But this is so hard too because there's in different circumstances there's arguments that will lend themselves to I should have gone to the eye test and then in other circumstances people will say the data didn't back that up and so it's very tough.
I mean to this point English and Sherry were averaging very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
You just had this feeling with Tim English. You're like, we know what Tim English is and can do. You just kind of had this feeling.
This is me falling in love with last year, right?
And maybe that's the lesson.
Yeah. And he was unique.
But I kind of, you were, and to your credit, it served you well. You definitely weren't afraid to trade in a unique player. And there were a couple of times I was
happy with that.
A couple of times I said to you during the season, I said, would you go for the vanilla option here? And you're like, no, I'll stick to my guns. And it pays off. At the end of the day, you've got a hat.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the season.
But in that circumstance,
Yeah, and because that was something that was a lesson from previous years is like, I was watching a little bit in the top 10, but like in terms of overall percentage of ownership, like it didn't factor into any of my decision making. Trying to just score the most points that I could. So, but I do obviously regret that. With a chance to fix up my mistake. But so those are the bad trades and the good trades. A lot of other trades in there which were just neither here nor there. But let's go back and put our beautiful faces on the screen and just talk about some overall lessons from the season. Just from because there was a bit of chat about this at the start of the year. How much of a percentage is luck in the game? Sometimes it is better to be lucky than good, but you have to be good, I think, to be top 100. You can't luck your way to a top 100, probably even a top 1,000 finish.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But you have to be you still have to be lucky to get there. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't just get there by luck.
Yes.
But you need luck to get there.
I understand. I understand what you mean. There's good coaches that put in a lot of time and effort that will get unlucky and miss, but there's not a lot of coaches that put in zero time and effort that will make the top 100.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So, and the thing that highlights this to me, massively is just like I see how much like time and effort you put into it and how much thought goes into it, and I don't put in that amount of time, but I'm able to like use you as a resource, and I know that where I finished is probably even inflated on the amount of time and effort I spend on it because I get to talk to you. So I think like that's highlighted to me as well, like having good people that you talk to and listen to, and obviously there's like awesome content out there from lots of different people. I think is pretty key to finishing where you might hope.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's something that. Yeah, I think we talked to Mini Monk about this. Maybe I can't remember if it was this year or last year, but like there is a correlation with how much time and effort you put into it and how you do. There's obviously that luck element, but I also think that talking about the rolling lockout, like to be successful in this game, you can't be a casual player.
The rolling lockout sucks, but
you can't. And the traders had that great bit where they were talking about, people with wives and girlfriends, and kids, and playing sport on the weekend. You're at a disadvantage. Honestly, you actually are. And I'll put my hand I don't do much on the weekends. I mean, I have a girlfriend who's, would love me to spend less time watching footy.
She's very patient.
But outside of that, like obviously. Even yourself, like you've got your daughter with you now, like you especially those like trades you've got to save in case it's laid out or watching the news, like that shit, to be on top of it and to compete at the pointy end.
So if you
can't just be a guy that switches off on the weekend and goes, oh, I had my trades in from Wednesday, that was just going to leave them like that. Like,
should be sweet.
You're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I don't like it that way. As much as it like helps me, I think the game shouldn't be like that, personally.
If you're looking at it from the perspective of wanting to grow fantasy to make it accessible for anyone who wants to join in, it's not the way to do it, is it? If you sign up and you know from the very start that because you play weekend footy or because you have a life, you're not going to be able to compete for the major prizes and stuff, it kind of does sour it a little bit. So, I think that... even though we should reward effort, like, you want to reward effort, you want to reward time.
I still think the cream would still, like, rise to the top.
Probably right.
But it just...
takes away that
it takes away that stress and that, like, the feeling of, I have to devote my life to this, otherwise I'm not going to have a chance. You would still feel like you have a chance. You do your research throughout the week and then you can switch off throughout the week. And fuck it, I would love to do that as well. Do you know what I mean? I'd love to do that too.
Be a huge win for mental health everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. Couple of little things. You touched on it before, but fixture analysis, I think, is a big thing, which is getting more and more accessible. Like DFS Australia, fucking great website.
Huge. They should have been at the thanks at the start.
Yeah, 100%. But also doing it when you're projecting forward and analysing and explaining things that have happened. So we talked about before, with like Bont and things like that. Like he'd come off a couple of tough games, explaining why they're performing poorly, so that, hey, even though they're not performing as what everyone wanted them to be, I'm confident enough to jump on there because things are going to turn around.
And the fixture analysis, I mean, obviously becomes easier the more of the way through your season you are because you've got more data. Yes. But then something that I would definitely also keep an eye out for is, like we were talking about Luke Ryan before, he might have been coming into the best fiction known to man, but because of the way...
things had changed.
Yeah, game styles had changed. Teams were playing him. So there's an element of the fixture analysis, but with that little asterisk that says you kind of need to be attuned to what's happening in those regards too.
For sure.
I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And this is where, like, again, I really value your input in terms of, like, seeing footy and seeing, like, what teams will do strategy-wise to stop another team doing that, because that plays into fantasy. Especially with those players that rely so heavily on a game style or a role or something like that, which Luke Ryan does. Other thing here, buy rounds. They're still, I believe, the biggest way to improve.
What was your grade in the I didn't ask you actually before.
Little sneaky A+.
Did you get an A+?
Little sneaky A+.
Jesus.
So, yeah, I think that is something that's really big. I wanted to pull up here. Actually, I forgot to do this before, but Lord of the Buys, shout out to Urban who runs this here. I'll flick this one over again to the thing here. But if you look at some of the coaches who did well in Lord of the Buys, so up here, these are the top sort of coaches that performed over the buy rounds. Look at their ranking. So the team who had the best buy period of Lord of the Buys, 14th. Next best, 8th. 10th. 217th, still great. 208th, 230th, 50th, 331st, 99th, 30th, 36th, 16th. So all the teams that were... I was 23rd in that ranking, but so there's people who are better than me still. The people who did well in the buys had a great season, essentially. And this is just because there is just more variables going on at that time.
I was going to say, you cannot luck your way through the buys in any way, shape or form. Do you know what I mean? Like these coaches, yes, they went well in the buys, but you know these coaches are invested in their teams because that's how you even possibly go well during the buys, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So, pay attention during the buys.
Yeah. So I think that's and we already knew it, but just sort of highlights that even further. And then something that I need to get better at, and I think a lot of us do, fucking luxury season, man. Need to improve here. This is the question that I have, and I want to get your thoughts. Would someone like me have been better off upgrading and just continue to upgrade the bench rookies?
I said this to you at one point.
You did. And the pressure, I think, of trying to stay in touch with everyone else around you right then and there is what prevents you doing that.
Yeah.
But the winner had 24 premiums.
Yeah.
He had a midfielder and a defender.
Loop.
And would have had a forward if he didn't go out.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's a case to be made for it.
Especially in a year like this where we all seem to finish early and we had that extra week that we normally would.
Yeah. This year... Look, I haven't played for enough years to know whether we got lucky having some like super cash gen guys late in the year too. Like so Logan Evans, Lawson Humphries. Like,
yeah.
I would anticipate you're not going to get that level of cash generation.
That does dictate it too.
Late.
Yeah.
But if something's working for you, and this is the only reason I even mentioned this to you is because you'd had such a good season. This has been upgrade cadence.
This has been a weakness of mine for 3 years in a row now. Like last year, I came out of the buys. I think I went from like 1,100 to 300 and then could only manage an extra 30 spots the last half of the year. The year before, I was 24th coming out of the buys.
Yeah.
Dropped back to 124.
Well, like, look at it from this perspective. You get to luxury season and you're trading away established players to bring in established players. So let's say, for example, you've got an established player that you're thinking, it's in luxury season, you're thinking, I don't really like this matchup or the run they're coming up on. So you're going to trade them to the guy that you think's got a good run. But if you can just do that through an upgrade, you don't have to trade out the guy who's going to a bad run. You just play the guy who's going into a good run.
Game,
And so, like... That is not going to work every single time. I think
it only works in a rolling lockout sense as well.
Yes. Yeah.
When you can loop.
Yes. And it doesn't, like I said, it's not going to work every time, but it might stop you from fucking up your team.
Yeah, well, fuck. And it would just, it would make it simpler, like that decision making, which, just fucking keeps me up at night. But I still think that's something that I'm going to have to get better at. And the other thing that made that more applicable this year, especially in the midfield, like who were the best 22 players? On any given week, those midfielders, you'd have one score shit, one score horrible, one score really well. And there was no obvious, like in years gone past, everyone, we've got to get Jack Steele. We've got to get Rory Laird. We've got to get Bont.
There was no consensus 8 in the midfield.
There was no one. There was the 2 rucks.
Yeah.
You had Whitfield in the defence. You had the forwards that you needed to have.
Yeah.
But once you kind of had those guys, like it wasn't like you had to have Butters at the end of the season or you had to have Dunkley. They all went shit at points, good at other points. Like it was...
Really did, didn't they?
Yeah. So I don't know if every year is going to be like that. Each year is a different beast. But if that turns out to be the case next year, I think it lends itself more to that. Just keep upgrading your bench. Maybe get 23, 24, 25 premiums and mix and match if you can. And then the last thing I wanted to just touch on was just challenging a popular notion of injury-prone players, because some names that went this year without missing a game. Zorko,
Remember at the
35 years old, didn't miss a single game.
Imagine starting Zorko.
Imagine starting Zorko. Dane Zorko.
What was his price at the start of the year?
It was cheap as chips because he missed so many times the last couple of years. I want to have a look at his games missed.
If you started Zorko, then you were cheating. Like you had that, some sort of...
You had that Back to the Future fucking...
Correct.
Like,
the almanac. You did. Yeah.
You had that there.
Fuck.
But yeah, look, previous... 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons, 17, 19, 21, 15 games in his last 4. And then, yeah, at age 35, he pops out the 23 games. In the longest season we've had, by the way.
And these are soft tissue injuries. These are injuries that will...
Had the round 0, everything.
Wow.
So
well done, Dane.
He didn't play. He didn't miss a game. Butters didn't miss a game. He's been talked about as injury prone and goes in hard and tackles. Whitfield... Didn't miss a game. I mean, he had the extra bye round, but in terms of injury, didn't miss one. And Tim English, who sometimes people say is injury prone, just missed the one game late. Second last game of the season.
Yeah.
So
that is astounding.
Just when you hear people talk about injury prone players, or LDU, did LDU miss a game? Because a lot of people were talking about him.
Yeah, but he still sucked for fantasy.
He still sucked. But in terms of that was a reason people weren't picking him. I'm going to check this actually.
Okay.
No, he played every game. So when people talk about people being burnt by players because they got injured or them being injury prone, you're injury prone until you're not.
Yeah, if you had told me
at
the start of the season that LDU would play every single game, I would have gone, he's going to be a smash pick.
Yeah.
Because I just would have anticipated him to do better.
Do good, but
yeah.
So that's always one that I've thought it was a bit of a lazy argument. Now, obviously, there are certain times you need to be more aware of people's injuries, especially when they've got injuries coming into the season or they're a bit older. It's just more likely. But it doesn't preclude someone from, as we see from Zane Zorko, having a healthy run.
But if you take me back, I'm still backing that logic of not picking
Zorko. I am too. And especially, like I said before, when you're in that round 5 to round 12 period,
yes,
I'm not taking those risks.
Yeah.
But maybe before that, in that fix-up trade... once the buys hit, and that's when I trade in Zorko. Once the buys hit, happy days.
Fix it up, yeah.
If he gets injured, I'll trade him out. It doesn't matter. Whereas if it puts me a week behind in that upgrade cadence period, the risk is higher. So, went a bit longer than I thought we would. Bit of waffling on.
That's all right. We like waffling.
But that's all I wanted to cover. Anything that you want else to cover in terms of lessons or learnings from this year? Or
I think that was good. Hey, I hadn't put it. To be honest, I hadn't put a great deal of thought into it between. When the season finished last night and now. But, it was good to jump on and have one last chat and congratulate you on your hat.
Oh, thank you very much, mate.
The little screenshot that Popowski put up today is exceptional. And I didn't realise how exceptional. This is just one last shout-out to you as well. But for anyone who hasn't seen this screenshot, it goes through the most successful coaches of the last 3 years. And there's a host of coaches that have won 2 hats. Okay, but of all the coaches on this list... even though you've won the 1 hat, your kind of aggregate ranking is the 3rd lowest out of all of them. So if we sum the total of your rankings over the last 3 years, despite not winning the 2 hats, it's pretty impressive to go.
I'm pretty stoked with that, honestly.
124, 272, and 16 is pretty cool. So
I mean, they've cherry picked 3 good years there. The year before that, I was 5,000. So
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
But coming into, cool. Top 300 3 years in a row. I'm pretty happy with that, and hopefully it can continue. I mean,
now you got to back it up. This is the hardest one to do: is back it up, back up the flag.
Collecting hats, it'll be tough, but we'll see how things go next year. This will be our last podcast for a good few months, I reckon. So, we'll see you guys next year. If you have enjoyed our pods, make sure you let your friends know, let your mates know. Like this video on YouTube, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe, all that good jazz, and we will see you guys in 2025. Until then, guys, we'll see you later. Bye.